Good afternoon and welcome to the Beverly Hills Bar Association Immigration Section and Barrister Section panel discussion on breaking into immigration law. Thank you very much to everyone who has joined us today. My name is Maggie Stewart. I'm the co-chair of the Immigration Section along with Joanne Litt. And here today is also Lauren Gabayan, who is the chair of the Barristers Section. And I'm going to be turning over the moderating duties to our colleague Catherine Ross in just a second. If you have any questions as we go along, please feel free to put them into the Q&A or into the chat function. We'll be keeping an eye on those and make sure that your questions are brought up. We hope to have a little bit of time at the end for question and answer as well. So again, this is meant to be a fun, informative, interactive event. Please join in, ask any questions that you have, and thank you very much for joining us. I'll turn things over to Catherine.
Thanks, Maggie. Hi, everyone. I'm Catherine Ross. I'll be moderating today. So we'll start in order, I think, if we just could start with you, Ali. Could you tell us a bit about your story and how you came into immigration law?
Sure. Well, hi, everyone. And my name is Ali Brodie. It's a pleasure to be with you today. I'm a partner at Fox Rothschild, where I manage the firm's national business immigration group and our EB5 immigrant investor practice. So I guess I'm looking at the questions that we were asked to comment on. So, you know, I got into immigration law. I think like many of us, you grow up in a household potentially with grandparents or parents even who are from other countries. And for my situation, I happened to grow up with grandparents who were from abroad. I always had some type of international interest. And, you know, one of the key themes of my parents' household was to be a citizen of the world. And while in college, I studied international relations. There was a minute of my life where I thought I would join the CIA, and you know, but then I always knew that law school was calling my name. And so during law school, I continued pursuing my international interests. I interned at a place that no longer exists, but it was called the Rocky Mountain Survivor Center, where I worked on asylum cases. Thinking I had a political asylum case that's timely today, a torture case coming out of Ukraine, and I happened to work on a slew of cases for those who had been subject to female genital mutilation in Africa. And so it was just really eye-opening work, something I'd never encountered in my life, and something that just kind of started me on this path. And you know, from there, I went on to, in law school, to work at the U.S. Court of International Trade in Manhattan. I worked for the chief judge there, and really learned a ton. But you know, as any internship or clerkship is an opportunity to kind of see, does this make you tick? And unfortunately for me, while I learned a lot, sitting on litigation cases about the international trade of zippers attached to cosmetic cases did not speak to me. So I, you know, remained great friends with the judge. He understood and was very supportive of me pursuing, you know, my interests. And so from there, I went on and worked at a boutique firm, where my first immigration case was an O1 visa for an Iraqi artist, and I just fell in love. That was like the rest was history. I knew I had to practice in business immigration, and I was starting at that point to really appreciate that, you know, many of the latest innovations that we see in the US, food products, software, fashion, all of these things, and film, right? All of this happens because we have these mechanisms or visas that allow us to bring people to the US. And so I knew that the rest was history. So in terms of what I do now, I have worked at boutique law firms practicing immigration, and really for the last 10 years, I've worked at national or international firms. And this has really been something that's critical to my practice, to work in a national firm that's multidisciplinary, meaning we don't just practice immigration. And my corporate clients always have needs well beyond immigration. And so not only is it a need for my clientele, but it's also just something that I've really enjoyed, learning something new every day when I can walk down the hall and speak to the entertainment department or tax or, whomever it is. In terms of my practice itself, it is 100% dedicated to corporate or business immigration. I'm working with companies that are sponsoring nationals for highly skilled work visas known as H-1Bs. I'm working with multinational companies transferring executives around the world on L-1 visas. I'm working with companies that are facing I-9 audits. So we're defending them with ICE. So hopefully they're not having to declare a bankruptcy, and hopefully they're able to walk away without having to pay a hefty fine. Trying to think, I work with a lot of startups, which are typically foreign entrepreneurs, and I happen to have a great passion in that field. So we're working with E2 investors who are investing. Sometimes it could be $50,000 to start a taco cart, which was one of my favorite clients. And of course, I have companies that are investing, $1 billion in the energy industry. So all over the map on there. I work with a lot of studios. Naturally, we're in the entertainment industry here in LA. So we're sourcing O1 visas all the time. And then I'd say the one thing that I think is probably unique about my practice compared to my esteemed panelists today is that I do practice in the area of EB-5, immigrant investor work. And these are foreign nationals who are investing currently $500,000 or $1 million into some type of business or government designated project in return for a green card. And this is a very unique area, I'd say, of business immigration law. Most business immigration lawyers don't practice an EB-5. It's something, pre-COVID, I traveled around the world. I've spent a lot of time in Asia and in Brazil working with US developers sourcing and marketing for investors abroad. Worked with thousands of investor cases and just learned so much about laws in other countries and foreign currency ordinance and currency control in India and China and so forth. And, it's just one of those things that for me, it's just something that makes me wake up every day and just have a lot of fun with what I do. So that's all I have. Hopefully that shows people that there's so many different areas of at least business immigration. And there's so many opportunities to practice, and still I get calls for people who need deportation defense, and I'm certainly not competent to do that. And but you learn who your friends are in the field and you refer and you keep learning. So for me, it's been a joy.
I had a question for you. Since
Sure.
you work in a big firm, that has all these, do you tend to because most of your work come from the firms like other corporate clients or entertainment clients, or do they come through you and then go that way?
That's a good question. So every firm is a little bit different in terms of how the immigration practice is handled within that large firm environment. And so I've practiced at a large firm where the immigration group was more of like a service to the firm's other clients and other partners or shareholders, whatever, in their particular clients. At my firm, we are a standalone practice group, which I'm proud to say. So all of our partners have our own clientele. But yes, we also, that's the nature of being in a large firm. Hopefully you're a team player, and I service all of our firm's clients as well as needed. So out here, we happen to work a lot with our entertainment department, as we do in New York. But I have my own book of business as to each of my partners. And so we're doing both.
Ali, I have a question as well. What percentage, you mentioned EB-5 program, but what percentage of your practice do you devote to that?
So I would say up until about 4 years ago, it was about 50% of my practice. Several years ago, just so you understand, the government increased the minimum investment amounts, and there's also a huge queue of individuals waiting to process, especially those from mainland China. And so from my standpoint, the practice kind of slowed down. Right now, part of the EB-5 program, which is known as the Regional Center Program, is currently dead. It lapsed, and so we're waiting for congressional reauthorization. So I've always been of the mindset not to have all your eggs in one basket, and I also can't imagine waking up every day and not being able to practice with H-1Bs and E-2s. And so I've always had a split, but there are people in my industry who are 100% dedicated to EB-5, and likewise those who just will never touch an EB-5 case.
Okay, thanks very much, Ali. We'll move on next to Atyria.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Atteria Clark, and thank you for having me here today on the panel. Just like Ali, I have always been international, diversity oriented. Throughout college, I was co-chair of the International Club at my university. I co-chaired with a man from Pakistan, and that was a great experience because I got to meet a lot of different people from a lot of different places, even back then in college. I then went on to law school in Miami, which is of course a very international city. And then I came here to Los Angeles, which is another very international city, to take a tax program. And then I actually got started practicing immigration law when I went back to Florida. I started there with the Department of Children and Family Services in dependency cases. And after a while, I definitely got burned out on that area of law. So I had an opportunity to work with a provider firm for prepaid legal services. I don't know if everyone probably knows about prepaid legal services. They usually contract with various attorneys in each state to act as the provider attorney for the clients that are in that area. So I got on with that firm and they assigned me to do the intake for the immigration cases. So in that position, I started to learn a lot about the immigration process, especially with, just preparing permanent residency applications, citizenship applications. And then I just started taking on clients on the side here and there, helping people with the adjustment of status and citizenship applications. And as I started to do that more, I started really enjoying that area of law. I eventually moved back out here to California and started on the tax firm for a couple of years. But then I eventually ended up with a full service immigration law firm here in Los Angeles. And at that firm, we did everything from the permanent resident and citizenship applications to the removal defense, to appeals to the Board of Immigration Appeals and appeals to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. So I got hands-on experience at pretty much every area, every level of immigration law that I could get exposed to. And then of course, in around 2008, we had the recession. I ended up starting my own firm while I was on unemployment. I just went out there and started passing out business cards and just started to develop my practice, focusing primarily on immigration law, since that is the area that I was thoroughly trained in, and just expanding from there. So today I run my own law firm. I do primarily the family-based petitions, opposite of Ali, which she does most of the business-based kind of cases. So my cases are focused primarily on family-based adjustment of status, citizenship. I also do a lot of removal defense. So I do have a lot of experience helping people overcome a deportation case. A lot of my cases in that area deal with asylum. So I do take on a lot of clients that are refugees seeking refuge in the United States and processing the asylum applications and using asylum as a defense to removal. And I also help with just the regular removal cases, criminal issues, and trying to help people with that situation. I do not have a lot of experience on the business side, so I definitely would defer to Ali on that area, but that's presently how I run my immigration practice. And I also would say that I practice in many areas. I've done litigation cases, I've done criminal cases, I've done family cases, but I definitely get the most reward from doing the immigration cases. I find that usually in the adversarial proceedings, they're not as adversarial as like a litigation case or a family law case, where you're dealing with like really aggressive opposing counsel. Litigation, you're dealing with constant crazy deadlines that will drive you crazy. So I always seek refuge in my immigration cases because they tend to be a lot less stressful. You usually can get cooperation from the other side as opposed to antagonism. And you just help people. It's really rewarding to help someone really accomplish their goals here. And especially when you see a case from, they're coming here as a refugee, and then you see them all the way through to citizenship. It's very rewarding to just help someone go through that process and, get to that final finish line where they're becoming US citizens. And I just always love practicing immigration law.
What would you say your biggest challenges are?
The biggest challenges lately have been dealing with the constantly changing rules and procedures and laws, especially with immigration court, and just having to finally figure out one way, and then now all of a sudden they change everything up, and then each court has its different rules and its different requirements, especially when you're dealing with the asylum cases or the bond cases, and you have to coordinate with various ICE offices throughout the country. Like some ICE officers are great and cooperative, some are you can't even reach. So that gets very frustrating because you'll try to follow up on a case and no one ever answers the phone, and like the case will be in limbo. So you'll have the family constantly calling, saying, when is their bond hearing? When are they going to get released? And you don't really have an answer. So I guess after a while of practicing in different areas before different judges and things, you start to really sort of know what to expect. Like I know if I have a bond case in Adelanto, how each particular judge is probably going to either grant bond or not grant bond. So you get used to that, but then you'll go to like Louisiana and it's a whole different ball game. Like, so that's probably the biggest challenge. And then just like I do a lot of appeals as well. And then just writing appeals, especially Ninth Circuit cases, they can get tedious, but.
Thanks for that, Atyria. Next, should we move on to Jen?
Hi, everyone. My name is Jennifer Vasquez-Macias, but I usually just go by Jen. I am the daughter of Mexican immigrants, and so I saw their struggles as low-income immigrants in the United States. And that drove me to help people who reminded me of them and their struggles. I've been involved in the immigrant rights movement since I was in college at UCLA. And from there, my sole purpose was to go to law school to represent immigrants. So I started at Loyola Law, where I did a focus on immigrant advocacy. And during my time at Loyola, I interned at the National Immigrant Law Center, where I learned about impacts litigation. And I also interned at Esperanza Immigrant Rights Project, where I helped with their NQRP cases. So these were cases where respondents were deemed to be mentally incompetent and were unable to represent themselves in front of an immigration judge. I also worked at the Immigration Justice Clinic at Loyola when it first started. And after I graduated from Loyola, I went to work at Esperanza Immigrant Rights Project as a staff attorney, where I represented unaccompanied minors in removal proceedings and in front of USCIS for special immigrant juvenile status and asylum. And from Esperanza, I moved on to Immigrant Defenders Law Center, where I continued to represent unaccompanied minors in removal proceedings. And so after working at Immigrant Defenders, I went to work at the USC Immigration Clinic, where I ran the Immigrant Legal Assistance Center, where I provided legal consultations and represented USC students, staff, faculty, and their family members in various types of immigration petitions. At USC, I also worked on their pilot project where I worked on BIA appeals and appeals to the Ninth Circuit. And I also helped with their citizenship project where I represented folks pursuing naturalization. And now, from USC, I am now back at Esperanza Immigrant Rights Project as a managing attorney for their immigration court help desk for the Los Angeles EYR courts, where I run the program where I guide pro se respondents in representing themselves in removal proceedings. And that's it.
How does that work? Like, how do you, I mean, because most of them don't have any legal training. How do you practice that process?
Yeah, so our process is we have a hotline that folks contact us with, and we sign them up for an intake. And so once through our intake, we're able to guide them to we have different workshops. So we have different workshops where we explain the different types of relief that are available. And if folks think that they're eligible for that type of relief, they will let us know, and then we will put them in further workshops where we help them complete like their asylum applications or work authorization applications as well.
Okay, all right, thanks, Jen, that's interesting. Next we move along to Fabrizio.
Oh, thank you. I'm Fabrizio Lopez, and I guess you guys asked me to talk about how I got into immigration. And interestingly, I myself am an immigrant. I married my wife, a U.S. citizen, came to the States more than 20 years ago. And when I applied for I wanted to work in the legal field, and I found this ad on the paper for a paralegal immigration position. And I wanted to work in litigation, actually, because back in Ecuador, when I was born, I was actually working for a law firm in litigation and all those things. So I knew I was gonna go to law school and all that. And when I look at that ad, I remember thinking, should I apply for this? Because in my mind, I thought that I didn't have any experience with immigration law. And my wife, who's very smart, you always marry someone smarter than you. She said, why aren't you applying? I mean, you went through the process. You probably can add to this firm. So I applied, and I got lucky that I got an interview with someone who became my mentor. I was clear about the fact that I didn't have any experience in immigration, but I told the lawyer that I experienced immigration myself. And he said to me, look, I don't have a job for you right now, but I get back to you. Eventually he hired me. Then I went to become a paralegal, worked for a few years on that law firm. And then eventually I started working for the Walt Disney Company as a paralegal. And then I went to law school at night. And I graduated from law school, became an in-house counsel, and I've been doing that for a few years. And I'm also now a professor at Loyola Law School. I teach business immigration law. I have the pleasure of having Jen, one of my students. She was amazing. And I also teach at UCLA Extension. I speak at USC and all that. So now I'm practicing business immigration law, and I also practice child labor law. So that's what I do. Regarding the immigration practice, I love what I do. I've been lucky enough to work on family immigration. I also work on pro bono cases. So I do DACA, I do CGs, which is a special immigrant juvenile status cases. I did an asylum case many years ago when I was in law school, cancellation or removal. So I've been doing a lot of those things. And I'm also obviously working now in business immigration. My clients right now are quite diverse. I can be working in the morning on a case for a director. Then later I'm working for a president of a company, scientist, performer for the Lion King, many different areas. So it's really fun. I love that. And I got to tell you, what I really excited to see the attendees here considering immigration practice. I think that what makes immigration practice so amazing to me is that no matter, even if you practice on family immigration or business immigration, you're always going to have an impact in someone's life, personally or professionally. You know, when I used to work for family immigration, it was family stuff. You know, I want to see my daughter, I want to see my wife, helping those people to get together. When I'm working in business now, you know, productions are like babies to producers and directors. So to the extent that I can help them accomplish their goals, that is what I do. And when I help someone get a green card, that is professionally rewarding, but also personally rewarding, especially now with so many, the complexity of immigration law has developed greatly in the last few years. Everything is more complicated. I'm sure all of us get those calls from people who tell you, oh, should I hire an immigration law lawyer to help me with this? And I have my answer to that is, you have to. I mean, you make a mistake in one little box and your case will be sent to Alaska or who knows where. And then you're gonna be waiting for 6 months. So I think that the immigration practice is so critical. And I am very proud that we immigration lawyers can help our clients accomplish their goals. And I think that in the last years, we have been going through a lot of changes because of policy, because, government determines how laws are applied. And we saw a huge increase in the last few years of questions. Every single case was questioned. I mean, I'm sure everybody here is nodding because you know what I'm talking about. You file a case with immigration, they came back with questions, even things that were clear. And I think there are two ways to look at that. One way is being very pessimistic and thinking, oh my gosh, I should get out of this career as an immigration lawyer because it's too stressful, it's too difficult. And I understand that, look, I know. But on the other hand, to me, is those years have made us be better lawyers. We got to be really good at what we do. We have to know their law. We have to know their rules. We have to learn how to fight the government back in some cases because they get it wrong. And I think that is amazing. And those of you who are attendees now considering practicing in this area, it's amazing, it's rewarding, it's very technical, and we need more lawyers. We need more good lawyers.
Yes, you raise a good point. It's quite a stressful and sometimes a very emotional field. How do you deal with the stress personally?
You develop, you develop techniques to deal with cases and compartmentalize, is that the word? Separate things. I hate this expression of work balance because to me that implies that balancing to me means I'm picturing the balance of justice. Something is giving, something is gaining. And to me, I don't see it that way. For example, right now, the fact that I'm lucky enough to be able to work from home, or the fact that I can work from any place I am, to me, it's something that I enjoy. So I always share the story that I was on vacation once. I was actually with my wife, we were taking a trip in Europe, and I have to take a phone call for a business call emergency. And I'm sitting at a cafe in Portugal dealing with this situation. And I remember thinking, okay, I could be upset because I am taking time away from my enjoyment of this place, or I can realize that I'm so lucky that I can do this here in this beautiful place and I can still do my work. So to me, I think it's all about your attitude regarding how you deal with things. And the higher you get in your career, you're going to have more things that you're balancing. So you're going to have to get good at managing your time. You have to get good at managing clients' expectations. I think that is a huge part of immigration practice. Atyria and our colleagues were mentioning how you get the calls from the clients. What's going on with my case? When am I going to? You have to learn how to deal with clients. You need to learn how to manage their expectations and to be very responsive. And I think that is going to get you ahead in your career. There's a lot of practice of law that is based on that. And I always bring the example when I teach one of my classes. I also teach in ethical lawyering right now. I tell people there's this, I attended a conference years ago when they have this visual that is so powerful to me, a bicycle. A bicycle has two wheels. One wheel is your expertise. The other wheel is your ability to deal with people and manage your clients. You may be a genius. You may be the super duper person who knows all the rules. But if you don't know how to manage those expectations and deal with people, you're just going to go in circles because that tire is going to be tired. It's going to be very small. So you have to find a way to balance those things. You have to be really good at what you do. You have to be really good at dealing with people, and that's going to get you ahead.
I had a question for you. Like, how does your work flow? Like, how do you get your assignments? Does it come from all over Disney or just?
A good question. Because
getting bombarded from everyone's just sending you emails like, oh, I have a director in this department or I have an executive in this department.
You will be surprised that, working for Disney is a multinational, multi-businesses company. So it's huge. I mean, it's insane. I mean, I've been going through so many acquisitions, and this is public information, so I'm not disclosing anything, confidential. I mean, Pixar, Marvel, Lucasfilm, 24th Century Fox. So the way how this works for me is exactly right. I got an email last night from someone saying, hey, we're a new company and we heard that you are the guy. Sure. Now I'm the guy. So I'm going to be working with this company, Searchlight, I think. This is a production company. So it happens like that. It also happens internally. You know, I've been working here for a long time. So people know me. So they know when they need questions, they need help with immigration issues or child labor laws, they know to reach out to me. And that's how it works. You know,
and you handle all of Disney's immigration work, or does Disney also farm out some of it to outside counsel?
I handle probably 95% of cases in-house, and I send a lot of cases to outside counsel. Most of the green card cases, I work with outside counsel. I have really good outside lawyers. I oversee them, and I handle that. Another part of practice for the attendees that to me is fascinating. Another interesting thing of immigration law, in my opinion, is that it is huge. You can become an expert in one piece of immigration. I always give you the example. You can become an expert on I-9 compliance. You know, some of you guys, attendees who maybe don't know what that means. I-9 is a form that was created in 1986 that requires employers to verify that someone is authorized to work. You can become a lawyer that is your specialty, and there's a lot of stuff there. You can become an EB-5 lawyer. You can become an asylum lawyer, cancellation or removal. There are so many things that you can do in this field. It's great. It's fascinating.
There's a question came through about practicing federal law. Did you want to speak about that, Atyria?
Yes, I believe there was a question in the section about how, can you all hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. About how you can practice immigration law nationwide as opposed to just being limited to one state where you're licensed. Immigration law is federal law. And although even with federal law, you can't necessarily practice federal law in other states where you're not licensed. For instance, if I had someone who had a federal criminal case in Missouri, I couldn't represent them in district court in Missouri because I'm licensed in California and Florida. So even though that's federal, even with a civil litigation lawsuit, you still have to be licensed in that jurisdiction in order to practice in the district courts there. So with immigration law, it's administrative federal law. So since it's administrative federal law, you can become eligible to practice before the immigration court. And then at that point, you can represent clients nationwide before the immigration court, the same way with tax court. So I've been able to represent clients nationwide all the way up through Board of Immigration Appeals. The problem comes in when you need to take a case to the circuit federal courts to do a petition for review. And if you are not licensed in a particular state or jurisdiction where that circuit governs, then you pretty much have to then refer the client out to someone who could do the petition for review in that state. Like I had a case that started in California with an asylum case with a bond, got the client out on bond. He moved to Detroit. I still handled his immigration case before the immigration court while he was in Detroit, and then also his via Board of Immigration's appeal. But then when they denied the Board of Immigration's appeal, I had to refer him out to someone who could do the Sixth Circuit petition for review because I'm only licensed to do Ninth Circuit petitions here in the Ninth Circuit. I could get licensed in the 11th Circuit since I am licensed in Florida as well, but I haven't done that at this point. But that's the dilemma that you run into when you do have clients nationwide. If you need to take it all the way up to the Federal Circuit Court of Appeals, then you might run into an issue there where you would have to refer the case out to local counsel.
Just to add to what Atyria was saying, I'm also familiar with with a number of U.S. immigration lawyers who live outside of the United States because it's a very portable practice, and so I know people in Canada, in Europe, who are based there. Now you have to, you may have to meet some jurisdictional licensing or qualification requirement, but it's not like getting called to the bar in that other country or province, you go in as a U.S. attorney and you open a U.S. immigration practice and serve clients who are in, in that jurisdiction. So it's, it's not only portable from state to state, but it's actually portable internationally. If you become licensed, for example, in California, and you decide you want to move to another country, you can continue to provide U.S. immigration services from overseas.
Yeah, if the question was posed because you're thinking, oh, I would like to explore whether I could practice that type of litigation in federal court while doing immigration work, I know one of my former students actually became an expert in suing the government when they denied immigrant work visa petitions. So that's a new thing that started happening a few years ago, and now she's the expert in that area. So you can do that too.
And does she practice in California?
Yeah, she's based right now in Orange County.
Okay.
Yeah, if you want a referral, let me know. One more thing of immigration practice, and I think everybody will, I mean, look, there's a lot of lawyers, obviously, but it's a very niche practice in the sense that you get to know each other, you get to work with some people. So there's a lot of collegiality in the practice that I enjoy a lot. We're not litigants against each other. So I have many experiences when I reach out to someone to ask for some help with some particular point of law that I don't know, because maybe I don't practice that. And every single time I've been so lucky that everybody has been really, helpful. So I think that is a really good thing that we have.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, next off to Joanne.
Hey, hi. I probably have the most roundabout way of getting to immigration. I was an engineer in undergrad, and then when I went to law school, everybody was like, you're going to be a patent litigation attorney because you have an engineering. And when I graduated, it was the popular thing. So I wasn't, every firm I interviewed at was like, oh, you're going to our patent litigation practice. They didn't ask me if I wanted to. Nobody asked me anything. It was, you have the right degree and you're going on, because patent litigation is highly, highly lucrative. It's a very intense, lucrative field, but the litigations go on, the cases go on for 10, 15 years. So I did that for a couple of years, and as to what Ali was saying, like not floating your boat, it was not, I was like, I don't want to argue about and in this thing over and have, 6 months of arguing over the definition of the color of the pipe or, the kind of metal used in the whatever it was. And I had to look up everything because I was a chemical engineering major. I don't know anything about computer chips, but your clients in litigation are like, oh, you're an engineer, you must know everything about every kind of thing. So it was a little bit too big kind of litigation. And I didn't feel like the impact mattered because, Apple loses one case, they win another one. So it's like $1 billion going back and forth, which matters to Apple, but it didn't feel like it mattered that much to them. Or whoever the big, multi-billion-dollar client was, because they would just do it again in 6 months. They would just file a new one over a slightly different patent. So when we moved so that was in Silicon Valley, and when I moved to LA, I was like, I have to just do something totally different. And the LA County Bar Association runs something called the Immigrant Legal Project, which is based in the federal building downtown, where a lot of immigration interviews take place at 300 North Los Angeles. And they were looking for volunteer attorneys who could speak either Spanish or Mandarin. And I can speak Mandarin, and I was bored. So I was like, oh, I'll do this. Could be interesting. And it was like the opposite of my previous job, where I, my clients, don't really, this was like people who really needed my help and were so happy that I could speak Chinese and like explain stuff to them. Even though I didn't know that much about immigration, the clinic was so great. Like it was, they monitored, they were really like, I learned so much. I learned so much about family immigration, I learned about asylum. It was very fast and furious, but from just volunteering for a couple months, I got a job from from a contact from the clinic, and then have been working in different boutique firms and got to sort of see different things that I liked. I did asylum work for a while, and then it was, I think I don't like the frustration of the unpredictability of asylum, because immigration court I have, this is my like personal thing, that it's not a real court. It's not an Article 3 court. It's not an administrative law court. It's its own kind of mess. And because it's its own mess, they can do whatever they want. They can decide to be a judge. They can decide not to be a judge. Sometimes they can demand you call them your honor, and sometimes they don't. It's so frustrating to not. I think the reason why a lot of us become lawyers is we like rules. We like knowing where, you know, where the boundary is. And I feel like in immigration court, it's just too chaotic. And what Atyria was saying, and I was like, oh, once you get this, once you figured out LA, you know, immigration courts, and you have to go to, then I had a couple of cases in Lancaster, and I was like, oh my God, like what, you know, this, I just figured out the 15 personalities I had to deal with in LA. And then I have all these other ones in Orange County. And I was like, this is, I was very stressed out from doing those. And I was like, I don't think this is my thing. It was too chaotic. It was very, it was too subjective. And I know a lot of immigration law is very subjective because you're submitting all your stuff to someone making a decision who isn't necessarily a lawyer themselves, may just not like your client's business, or, you know, I think at a different thing I was talking about how I had a client who was a nude model for Playboy, you know, and that was how she was trying to get her O1. But, you know, I don't think, not every officer is going to be like, oh, great, awesome. Like, you're at the mercy of officers who have their own biases, their own, you know, values, they own like who should be allowed here, who shouldn't. What I liked about immigration was that it was like a direct impact, right? I didn't have to wait 10, 15 years to see if my client won, and, you know, whatever, like whatever I did, either they got it or they didn't, and we could do something about it. And I liked having that. And so I liked having that part, but the asylum atmosphere was just a little bit too crazy for me. So I started doing more business immigration, and I actually took Fabricio's class at UCLA Extension many years ago.
Oh my God.
Oh. And I was like, oh, you can, like, you know, because it was like, I think it was like a lot of different options. I'm like, oh, you can work with these kind of people and these kind of people. And I actually worked primarily, most of my clients tend to be professors, like academic researchers and artists, and less, I did a lot of actors type people for a while, but kind of difficult as clients. So I tend to veer towards musicians, you know, like visual artists. Like, I like those kind of personalities better. And so I still do some pro bono work, but I feel like it's more psychologically, I feel like, draining on us than when I did patent litigation, because when I did patent litigation, I could, you know, once I did it, it was done. Like here in immigration, you serve sometimes as people's like therapists. I feel like, you know, you have to talk them down. You have to convince them that just because they've waited or their friend got an O1 visa in 6 months doesn't mean you're going to get an O1 visa in 6 months. You might have a harder case. You might have other problems with yours. And I think that whole thing that Fabricio was talking about is, you know, learning to manage expectations was a big learning curve for me, because I would get sort of frustrated with clients being like, I don't know, like, I don't know what your friend did, you know, I don't know who your friend is and why they got their green card in so short a time, and they might be lying to you. And then I was like, okay, I just calm down. It's, you know, everyone has different things, and it's important to let your clients know, just, you know, every situation is different. Every office is different. Nebraska's does stuff, you know, Orange County does stuff. Laguna Niguel makes decisions different from Vermont, and Vermont makes different decisions. Like, it's, you learn that different visas kind of get better chances at certain service centers, and you know, you can't really choose which one you have, but if you let them know that, okay, this is going to be simpler if you do it here versus there, people get a little bit, there's a lot of like, there's more talking to, which is good and bad, you know, which is good because I think it's a good way of interacting with the clients, but sometimes it's very draining when you have to have the same conversation, you know, a million times, when people are like, but, you know, my friend still, you know, she only did one commercial when she was in Japan, and she got her green card. And I was like, well, maybe it was a Nissan commercial, and maybe, you know, you don't have that. So you don't, you know, it's not going to work for you. So that's, yeah. So I think it's it's a really interesting practice, and it changes all the time. So which can be fun and super highly stressful. If, let's say, presidents change and then they decide that every blank space on your form is going to cause it to be completely rejected, which is what happened under the last president, where we used to always, if you didn't need to fill out that space, you didn't fill it, or you put NA, and then all of a sudden people were being rejected if you didn't have something in each space. And so, yeah. So it's kind of keeps you on your toes.
And Joanne, what advice would you give to some lawyers starting out in terms of networking, which has become quite difficult with COVID?
Yeah, it's hard now, but I feel like if you're switching from another field to immigration, I think volunteering is the best way, because there's so many volunteering opportunities. There's so many places, like between all the clinics, between all the like Esperanza, like I don't know, like groups like that always need attorneys to just get in and just be a body and do it. And even if you've never had immigration experience, like you know how to be an advocate for somebody, you know how to write that way, you know how to talk that way, that is my client, blah blah blah, you know how to get into that mode where you are defending somebody and representing them and want to be their person. So I think it's the best way if you're trying to get into it, learn about it. It's a fast and furious way of learning the subject matter, and they always need people. There's so many opportunities to do pro bono work and volunteer work, because we're just kind of in a crazy time of crisis between so many different things. And so Jennifer just wrote, Esperanza has a lot of volunteer opportunities. We train people. So yeah, look to pro bono. I think that's probably, and you'll meet people. You'll meet really interesting people. You'll meet people who work at those organizations, but you also meet other volunteers who do something else. You might meet Fabricio, because he's doing pro bono work, or you might meet Ali doing, you'll meet other people who aren't just doing, nonprofit work. You'll meet a big range of people. So I think that's the best way, because it's kind of networking like the traditional way I feel like it's harder in this field, because there's not a lot of networking things where everybody just kind of hangs out and drinks wine. So.
And Ali, you mentioned earlier that you used to travel a lot abroad. Is that starting to come back slowly for work?
Not so much, which I'm actually kind of grateful for. I think one thing that this pandemic taught us is that we can accomplish so much through these Zoom or whatever the video platforms are. And gosh, I've been exposed to so many new technologies where I feel like I don't even need to go to a convention ever again, because I can sit at a table electronically and bop around to the different tables and meet people that way. But I think it will eventually, but right now doesn't seem to be happening. Domestically, yes, but internationally, no. Something else that just kind of popped in my brain is listening to everyone's story. I think everyone can tell we're all passionate about what we do for so many different reasons. Something in our field that's a little bit different, I'd say, than in others is this notion of ethics and the practice of law. And this is a field, for better or for worse, that has been subject to, I would say, so many people who are either unlicensed or they might even be licensed, but don't necessarily have the ethical mindset. And so that's something to be mindful of. I know, to me, the lessons that I learned early on were hone your craft. If you're good at your craft, that's great. To be a sponge, and ethics matter, and everything else kind of comes into place if you're good at those three things.
I have a question for Jen. Just how have you, I understand your passion comes from coming from an immigrant family, but can you describe what it's like working in public interest law, and good and bad?
Oh, well, I don't want to discourage anyone from to not be a nonprofit attorney, but the pay is not as high, if you were to be working as a private attorney doing immigration law, but it's getting better. A lot of nonprofits in Los Angeles, especially, have been unionizing. So, you know, that with that comes contracts and higher pay. Another thing is that it's extremely emotionally taxing. And, you know, I'm lucky enough to be able to afford a therapist to, you know, deal with the secondary trauma that comes with representing folks who are in removal proceedings, who have suffered really terrible things in their home countries. But the good thing about it is that you help people, you know, tell their stories and help them win their cases and get to stay in the United States and be safe from harm. And that is one of the most rewarding things, I think, in working with these populations and folks. Another thing that I really like about working at a nonprofit is working with a lot of like-minded people who are in it to like help folks get relief, and who really care and who are compassionate and kind with their clients as well. And that's, you know, some of it, but there's a lot of good things, but that's just a few.
And Lauren, are you practicing immigration law as well at the moment?
I am. I work for a small firm in Culver City called the Immigration Professor. Right now I'm doing a lot of family law, helping people get green cards, which is very rewarding. And something that was kind of touched on earlier is just that we're able to do all of our work virtually, online. So I've had folks in Alaska and Tennessee and Los Angeles and never generally met in person, which is, and even trials are now, I had a trial in New York where I was just a head on a screen. So I find that kind of interesting, that you're able to do that in immigration law. But I do mostly family law, like I said, getting folks green cards, working with them to get citizenship. I do have one asylum case that is just, it's a lot. But being able to be her advocate and help her through the situation, once we get to the end, will be very, very, very rewarding.
How about you?
And for whatever it's worth, I came to immigration in kind of a roundabout way too. I did a bit of employment litigation before, just out of law school, which quite frankly probably gave me PTSD. I did a bit of, I did a lot of doc review. For anyone who's interested in that, I think I did 3 years of doc review before, so I ended up, I didn't just jump straight to immigration law. I started at, I was doing doc review, and then I got a job with this employment lawyer who, like I said, gave me PTSD, but someone who was working in his office, we made friends. She was doing entertainment visas and needed some help with overflow work. So she hired me on a contract basis. And she just happened to work, we moved offices a couple of times, and she just happened to work in an office with another another immigration attorney who just had his general practice. And he used me as a contract attorney for one thing, and that turned into 2 things, into 10 things, and now I'm working for him. So I kind of fell into it. I have a little bit of entertainment experience in my background, but so the entertainment visas, getting people O1s for singing, sound recording, any other acting, that was kind of my jam for a little bit, and it helped transition me into more general immigration practice, which I'm really enjoying right now.
So we're coming up pretty close to the time. Are there any other comments that anyone would like to discuss or talk about?
I was going to simply
I have a
comment.
comment. Just
Okay, go ahead.
oh,
Sorry. Go ahead.
thank you. Just a quick thing for anyone who's just starting out in immigration or really law generally. One of the best pieces of advice that I've gotten is to join Facebook groups that have to do with your specialty or even just immigration law generally. Facebook groups or the bar associations that have to do with immigration, because like Fabricio was saying, people are very friendly, people are always willing to help, and not only can I ask questions, but because they're in my Facebook feed or in my LinkedIn feed or whatever, I'm always learning about new areas of law and where different laws are being passed or different areas that might come up in the future. So I've just found that to be a really helpful thing to have in my back pocket.
American Immigration Lawyers Association, AILA, also has a great membership and connection with the listserv where you can definitely bounce questions off of people and see what people are asking each other to help.
And their policy memo database is great because you can find, I've used that to get people out of deportation where I'm like, here's your own policy memo, and they have a great database of that.
Yes.
Where they collect all of them, where they have a lot of their internal, I don't know how they get them, but the internal memos within USCIS, like how they make decisions, how they flag cases. Sometimes they get those in there. So that's a good resource.
Yep. And Kurzman book.
Oh, Kurt.
It's a good resource to have in your library.
$900 behemoth.
You know, I've also found ILRC. I don't know what their Immigrant Legal Resource Center. I have their family law book and it simplifies things. It tells me exactly what I want to know. It doesn't get too mired in the details. It's just been wonderful. So there are lots of resources out there. And coming to something like this is also great because you learn about all of these things. But Fabricio had something in particular that he wanted to throw out there too.
There are a couple of really quick ideas. Number one is that on the dealing with clients, another interesting part of immigration practice is that you're going to have to learn to be sensitive to different cultures. You're going to learn from that, and that's going to help you manage expectations because some cultures have and obviously it's a generalization. Each person is different. We all know that, but you learn how to deal with that, and that's going to make you a better lawyer. The other thing that I think you want to reflect on, all of you who are going to be lawyers one day, is that I think the law practice has changed radically in the last few years because it used to be that people pay you because they didn't have access to the law. It used to be a time where the only way for people to get access to the law was to go to the library and be lucky enough to get the law from there. Nowadays, your clients come to you with a law in their hands and they show you, hey, I found this website that tells me this and that. So you have to reflect on what is the value that you bring to your client as a lawyer. In my opinion, the value you bring is your understanding of the law, how to use the law to advance the interests of your client, your ability to communicate clearly how the law operates to any level, whether you're dealing with someone with a high school diploma to all the way to a PhD scientist. You have to accommodate your communication skills depending on that. And that's part of what we do as lawyers right now. So, and also the other thing that's interesting, and I think some of you mentioned, is that a lot of our clients are coming from countries where they are afraid of authority. And sometimes I became a US citizen a few years ago, but we forget about how that is such an important thing for you to keep in mind when you're advising your clients. What for you may be something as simple as I'm going to pick up the phone and talk to the government agency officer, and you are comfortable doing that. When you are a client who, number one, doesn't speak English as a first language, number two, is afraid of authority, your job is going to be help that client to deal with that anxiety. So that is important.
Two phrases that you will learn to abhor. My friend said, Or I went to Google and
Yeah, right.
yeah,
My
get
friend
ready
Google.
for that. In every area of law that you practice in, you won't escape it.
So if we're closing right now, is that the time we're closing right now?
We are, Fabrizio, we're
Oh.
coming on to time.
Yeah, and I mean,
Thank
I
you.
just thank you for the opportunity to put us here together. It's fascinating to see all this panel with so many different practices in one area. And those of you who are attending, and if you are interested in becoming one of us one day, I think there's a lot of opportunities. So good for you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for all your time and valuable insights. Thank you.
Mhm.